to consult you on the last day, where we would consult you a few weeks or a week before the event. Minister wants us to do things on time, to consult the machinery on time, to inform the machinery on what is happening or what the department is doing. In that way, all of us will be able to work together. All of us will understand each other in terms of where we are and where we have to meet each other. We informed you on the 19th how the Women's Day is going to be conducted. Today, we're going to consult you on different things. And I think you're going to be excited in terms of the other things that we will be consulting you on. We are consulting you on 3 issues. We'll be consulting you on the 16 days of activism on gender-based violence. I think you know that always we consult you in November. But now we said, because we need to do the preparations, we want the 16 days this year to be different. And Minister says she doesn't want it just to be an event, but it should be a program that is advancing the rights of women, or the programs that is making people to account on what they have been doing on gender-based violence or to end gender-based violence. Hence, we're consulting you on time, because you'll also have to do or to make some preparations for the participation during the 16 days of activism. Also, we will be consulting you on the CSW chairship. I think you might have known that South Africa was in the bureau, or is in the bureau of the Commission on the Status of Women. Now South Africa is the chairperson of the bureau on the Commission of Status of Women. And there are processes that South Africa would have to follow. South Africa will have to consult further, but also you know that the Commission on the Status of Women is reviewing the methods of work of the commission, of how the CSW is conducted. And I think South Africans have a lot to say about that. So you'll also be consulted on that. Also, you'll remember that previously the gender focal persons used to meet with the department on a monthly basis, and the national machinery the minister used to host the national machinery on a quarterly basis. However, somewhere down the line, because of COVID-19 and other things, that has fallen off. The minister says she wants to communicate with civil society organization and the machinery in general, the Commission on Gender Equality, Parliament, and all the stakeholders who have an interest. Now, it's no longer going to be a gender machinery. As you know, that the minister's mandate is on women, on youth, and persons with disabilities. So the national machinery, to be chaired by the minister, will incorporate all the 3. So those are some of the things that we are going to discuss and consult you on today. Thank you very much for attending the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation. I'm thanking you in advance for your participation and cooperation in all that we'll be doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Charlene, can you put the program again? Thank you. Okay. I also wanted to apologize in advance for the Deputy Minister. The Deputy Minister is not able to participate because there are other issues, pressing issues that have come up. So she will not be participating, and she sends an apology for not being able to make it today. I hope you'll forgive her. Without wasting time, I would like to request the Minister to give us a keynote address. You know, our Minister Maite Nkwana Mashabane, is the Minister of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, the most important sectors. Thank you very much, Minister.
Well, Program Director and our Director General, Advocate Nkatago Joyce Maluleke, UN Women Multi-Country Office Representative, Ms. N. Chituku Shongwe, representatives of the Commission of for Gender Equality, honorable members of parliament in attendance, representatives of the civil society, government and business, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to thank you for joining us today for national consultations on two important topics on South Africa's chairship of the Commission on Status of Women's CSW and the 16 Days of Activism campaign for 2021. Let me express my appreciation for your commitment and contribution for working with the department on various important issues. In South Africa, we have been facing a mammoth task, which we have been given with humility, of leading the responsibility for CSW for the next 66 and 67th sessions in 2022 and 2023, respectively. This demonstrates the international community's confidence in our country on matters of gender equality and women empowerment. It is our responsibility and our collective responsibility as government, civil society, and business sectors to make this chairship a success. Our chairship for this CSW will come at the time when the Beijing +25 review and appraisal has revealed that no country has achieved gender equality in 25 years after adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. As the chair of the CSW, South Africa will be leading about 45 member states of the Commission. The theme of the CSW session in 2022 is entitled Achieving Gender Equality and the Empowerment of All Women and Girls in context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. In addition, the priority theme for the CSW session in 2023 is entitled Innovation and Technological Change and Education in Digital Age for Achieving Gender Equality and Empowerment of All Women, and particularly girls. The important task of South Africa's chairship for the 2 consecutive years would be an important opportunity for our delegation to advance the national priorities and the African Union continental agenda on gender equality, gender mainstreaming, and women empowerment. It will also provide an opportunity for South Africa to work with about other member states of the CSW to address the challenges facing the international community to effectively and efficiently accelerate gender equality. Program Director and our DG, COVID-19 has exposed the existing inequalities in our society. This invisible enemy continues to affect the lives and the livelihoods of our people. We should be cognizant that the pandemic is still with us, and let us continue to observe and respect all COVID-19 protocols. By the way, it's not that we follow these protocols because we want to, but we are losing our own loved ones almost every day. Our very beloved sister, N. Chitongo Shongwe, had to painfully say goodbye to her mom. Our sister, we believe our beautiful mother is lying peacefully and had done that which God had said, go do. And we will continue to pray that her soul rests in peace. And all other women, men, relatives, South Africans. When we were young, we used to make arrangements of funerals. Now we are burying our people daily in South Africa. As we are sitting here, for some reason, we had more than 1,700 people confirmed to be positive in one day for the first time. So we are making this appeal because we want to really maintain whatever is left of the livelihoods that we take care of. I'm therefore appealing to all here today not to lose heart and courage, but to continue to fight this scourge, but also to fight for women's rights and empowerment. Despite the challenge facing us, it is important and imperative that we don't lose hope, but to continue to fight for gender equality and advancement of the lives of women and girls in our country. As we host consultation during the Youth Month, we are reminded of the challenges that young women face, particularly how they are affected by COVID-19, at the same time continuing to suffer gender-based violence and femicide. In addition, unemployment continues to affect many young people. Our work towards achieving gender equality seeks to address these challenges and many more. The fight against gender-based violence is a national priority, and it is imperative that we monitor or continue to monitoring of the implementation must be given more zeal. This would require joint program planning with and between the two houses, the National Assembly and the and the NCOP. The annual 16 days campaign takes place during a period between International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, 25th of November, and the International Human Rights Day, 10th of December, and thus symbolizing that violence against women and children is indeed a violation of human rights. This 16-day period also highlights other significant dates, including the 1st of December, which is the World AIDS Day, and the 3rd of December, which is the International Disability Rights Day. During this year's 16 days campaign, we want to focus on accountability. We want government and the society at large to respond to the question, what are you doing to end gender-based violence and femicide? In this regard, we are proposing the theme, the year of Charlotte Manya Makgomo Matseke, 16 days of activism from awareness to accountability. This theme aims to hold everyone to account for the scourge women face every day. We are aware there is a massive problem. We are aware of the war on women's bodies. What we are not aware of is that being done, every single organization needs to combat this scourge. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to hold the 3 spheres of government to account through legislative arm of the state on the progress made through the implementation of 16 days of activism campaign for no violence against women and children, including those with disabilities in the past 23 years. The parliamentary response to the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide is to encourage vigorous oversight and accountability over the department meant to implement its various pillars. You will recall that President Ramaphosa convened a joint sitting on the 18th of September 2019 to address the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide in the country. 4 key objectives emanated from the sitting and relate to law reform, funding modalities, giving effect to the 2018 Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, and formalizing the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. The relevant parliamentary committees that has responsibility for the oversight over the department and the roles of justice, crime prevention and security cluster of the government departments, and the government and security cluster of committees is required to coordinate the specific actions to give impetus to the NSP. A total of 17 parliamentary committees all bear some responsibility for over the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide to a varying degree. An emergency action and response plan was implemented over the past 6 months period, and a report presented to the President in this regard. The interim steering committee charged with the development of the NSP and gender-based violence and Femicide was discharged of its duties and submitted a report to the president. Despite all these efforts, gender-based violence and femicide continues unabated, with numerous incidents of really, truly, scarily heinous violent crimes perpetrated against women, children, and elderly persons with disabilities. It is imperative that coordinated approach is finalized in the Parliament to encourage more astute oversight on what the President has called the second pandemic and what has become known as the silent pandemic of abuse and death of children. We have already begun meetings with Parliament to set the plan into motion to access parliamentary processes to hold government to account. Women are tired of words and want action. We envisage 16 days to be about reporting on what is being done, not on what will be done. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our national consultation on these important topics, I wish to encourage each and every one of us to remain constructive and provide valuable inputs to our collective success. I therefore wish you fruitful deliberations, not only for today, but on this journey of us, of bringing about equality in our lifetime. I thank you, Program Director, and all distinguished guests present here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. I think all of us have heard what the Minister said. I'll start from where she was ending, about 16 days, the fact that all of us have a responsibility to ensure that we end gender-based violence. We also have a responsibility to ensure that we prevent gender-based violence. And now, as Minister had indicated, that she is tired of us just meeting during 16 days. She wants people to account. Hence, she's taking now the 16 days to Parliament so that people who are responsible for implementation can account. So you see why we consulted you on time, because you also have a responsibility to do your own homework, to gather data, and to be able to empower the speaker to be able to call people to account. You heard the Minister spoke about COVID-19. You know, when I look at our statistics every day and you look at other countries, it seems as if we in South Africa, and especially we in Gauteng, there's something wrong that we're not doing properly, because it seems as if it's skyrocketing when in other places it's going down. I think what the President keeps on calling, and this is what the Minister said, that we need to ensure that we keep safe and we protect others, because if we keep safe, we protect others, and people must just stay at home and people not gallivant everywhere, because, and this is what the President always says, he says, COVID-19 can't walk, it doesn't have mobility. We are its mobility. So if we want to curtail it, we'll have to sit down. Also, Minister spoke about the South Africa's chairship of the CSW. We have a lot of work to do as the chairpersons, because we have to lead. And you know, South Africa sets the trends, but also it's not the chairship of South Africa, it's the chairship of Africa, because South Africa represents, or it's within the Africa group. So South Africa not only is going to consult in South Africa, South Africa has the responsibility also to consult the entire Africa group. So we have a lot, and not just a public service, but also civil society organization. You know, you heard Minister saying the CSW is going to review the methods of work. So that means you also have to work. You have to you have to do your own research and look at what has not worked and what is working. Because I think with the CSW, we will consult you further. The Minister will want us to consult you further when now we look at the review of the methods of work themselves. So, but also I think it's something that we need to celebrate. South Africa is the chair of the Bureau of the CSW. That Minister, well done. Well done. You have represented South Africa very well, and you fought for South Africa to get this chairship. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Without wasting time, I would like to call Ms. Ntsiki Sisulu to present on the 16 days program of 2021. I think it is exciting. The 16 days, the way it is going to be hosted this year, as Minister has already indicated, Ntsiki will just beef up on what Minister has already said. And I hope we will work together, all of us, to be able to make sure that what Minister wants to see happens. Because the way she wants to see the 16 days, it's different. It's going to be different from what it used to be. Thank you very much. Ntsiki?
Thank you very much. Good morning, the Minister and colleagues. Projecting on the 16 days.
Unclear.
Thank you very much. As already indicated, that the theme for 60 days that we're working on is from activism. Am I audible?
Not hearing. You are not audible. We can't hear you, Hans.
Yeah.
Ntsiki, hi, Shalenia. May I request that you just move about, as you've heard from participants and certainly myself, your audio is breaking.
Is it better now?
That's better for me. I think that's coming through better.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
No, it's worse now.
It's, yeah.
It's good enough for me to continue?
No, it's got worse.
It keeps breaking, Ntsiki.
All right, any better?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
All right. All right. Apologies for that. Okay, so so that was the theme is as projected from activism to accountability, from activism, from awareness raising, because 16 days was about awareness. So we want to ensure that there's accountability. Should I continue presenting, Shelen, from my side? I think it's not moving.
Ntsiki, your signal is coming through really poorly on audio. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Should I change devices? Sometimes when I'm on the laptop, it's not that great. If I change devices.
Yeah, it's more for a signal issue. I mean, your audio is fine. It just keeps breaking, like a poor signal issue. So are you able to move or change device? Others may confirm, but for me, certainly your audio, we get you for 5 seconds of good audio and then you start breaking. So I'm not sure at this point, even if you ask me to change slides or anything, I've not been able to hear you.
Yes, isolation and everything. Is this any better?
I think that's coming through better. Did you just want to keep speaking, Nsiki, and we might interrupt you?
Is it fine now?
I think it's coming better now.
Is it fine now?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Is it good enough for me to continue?
Nsiki, I think it is. I think if you proceed, and if there's issues, I think we'll interrupt you.
All right. Please, can I have the introduction slide? Okay, so as indicated, we've in South Africa, we obviously started 16 days of activism in 1998, but we know that globally it's about violence against women. But in South Africa, we always we've added issues of violence against children as well, because we know that violence is also perpetuated against children in the country. And of course, the fight against gender-based violence and the president has actually led us in this indication of a second pandemic. And of course, annually, we 16 days will start on the 25th of November and will end on the 10th. And then, of course, there are a number of important days. And I think Minister emphasized the issue about violence against persons with disability as well. So the World AIDS Day, of course, on the 1st, and then on the 3rd, there's International Disability Rights Day, which, of course, as a department, we will be leading on that as well. And of course, as indicated, it's for the three spheres of government, national, provincial, and local government. So all the spheres of government need to be accounting to the legislative arm of the state to ensure what is it that they have done in the past 23 years. Oftentimes as a department, everybody would say, what is the department doing? What is the department doing? And this is talking about the collective accountability that every arm of the state, every sphere of government is required to take on board, that Parliament also takes Parliament to the people. Of course, it will depend on the COVID regulations at the time, so that they are also accounting to the people what they have done. And of course, this is linked to to pillar number 1 on accountability of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of course, the South African context is that, of course, the president did in September hold a joint sitting. So this will then be a continuation, essentially, from the joint sitting, because what we are requesting from the National Assembly is that we have a joint sitting. We have a joint sitting, of course, it'd be.
The sound has got considerably worse.
And they have done, given that they have progress around. Okay. And now?
Yes, continue.
Shalan?
Yeah, we're trying to hang in there. It is.
Must continue. Thank you.
But yeah.
All right. So what we know is that even though there have been efforts around gender-based violence and femicide, that it does continue. And as indicated, it affects women, children, persons with disability, as well as the elderly. And so we want to ensure that we have a coordinated approach, which we will finalize with Parliament to ensure more astute oversight on what the president has called upon upon the country to do, and also especially because we have a second pandemic. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so as DG has indicating that as South Africa being a chair of CSW, we know that gender-based violence is a global issue. And of course, WHO will have some data on that, particularly in Africa. And it's important that we know that as we look to fight gender-based violence, that the problem is beyond South Africa and also includes other countries, of course, our neighbors as well. So human trafficking being one of the issues that we need to consider around gender-based violence. But we also know that even though there have been specific frameworks to respond to issues of violence against women and girls, it's not been adequate enough at the moment. But we also know that COVID-19, as well as HIV and AIDS, has not assisted us in any shape, way, or form. As a matter of fact, it's exacerbated the issues of violence against women and made women more vulnerable during this time. And so we do need to be more vigilant and have an approach indeed that is different. Can I have the next slide, please? I thought it was really important that oftentimes people will not associate gender-based violence with only physical violence. So it was really important to go back to the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women and ensure that we are anchored and are moving in the same direction around the fact that violence is any act of gender-based violence that results in the likely physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women. And during COVID-19, we know about the type of psychosocial support that people have needed, and it becomes even more so now during COVID. And so it's important that women are able to actually look at the entire spectrum, and that even the media doesn't just focus on one form of violence and leave that as adequate. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of our focus, of course, Minister has spoken to that around how we're going to do it. I'm going to skip the slide and do the approach, which is the one right after this. So in the approach, well, the National Assembly, Parliament itself already has a oversight framework as well that they have developed with the aim of ensuring a coordinated approach for Parliament to address gender-based violence in the country. So this was very useful to know, and open parliamentary that have responsibility for oversight, crime prevention, and security cluster. So of those committees, there are about 17 committees that they'll be working with. And then, of course, there'll be about 12 in the National Assembly and 4 in the NCOP. And of course, the multi-party women's caucuses will be also included in that. So in terms of the approach, they obviously Parliament will guide us. We have written, Minister has written to the Speaker to begin to have these engagements on how we will ensure that we are able to fit into the schedule of the second term, which is now out, and then we will then align ourselves to that. Can I have the next slide, please? So we do know that there is an interministerial committee on gender-based violence and femicide for the NSP, and our approach was to ensure that at least those key departments participate initially first within the debate, but also then the legislature becomes a very critical one. The machineries, as we are now, are also important stakeholders for our 16 days to make sure that because remember that machineries include the civil society, private sector, as well as the legislature, so and government. So it's important that we have that comprehensive approach to it. Can I have the next slide, please? So our dates, obviously, we had proposed that the president would then be launching the 16 days in the National Assembly. But on that same day, of course, the debates. We, however, had to change our plans a little bit because we have to align to the schedule of Parliament. So we're looking at least 2 to 3 days where we are actually having the debates in the National Assembly, but we would also then have provincial legislatures also having debates. Some of the days during 16 days are on a weekend, fall on a weekend, and we want to make sure that we have an intensified media campaign during that time, working collectively towards that. And I think this brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you. I apologize for the lecture.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nsiki. I think people were able to read in certain instances because we couldn't hear you. You were cutting, but I won't waste time because Ms. Gituku Shongwe has to leave at 11, so she requested to present now. So I'm going to request her to present. Ms. Gituku Shongwe, the UN Women Director representative in South Africa.
Thank you so much, DG, and really want to thank you for this opportunity and recognizing my big sister, the Minister, Nkwane Mashabane, and thank you so much for your kind words and your messages of support. I received them loud and clear when I was in Kenya for the unfortunate passing of my mother, and COVID-19 is real, very real, and it was really a very traumatic experience, but one that I think, you know, you've heard the minister loud and clear, that we have to really do everything we can. There's nothing better than prevention. And if there's any way of doing it, this is what we must do. So thank you for that opportunity. Can I please ask Shalen to drop the screen? And Shalen, I want you to just watch. I saw some marks that made me wonder whether or not there was an attempted hack. So if you could drop your screen, I'm not going to show my screen because I am a bit concerned about the marks and whether or not there isn't an attempt to hack us again. So Shalen, if you could drop your screen, please, because that's what is used to do the hacking. I would like to talk about the CSW methods and what we are, you know, what South Africa is up against now as we start preparing for the important role of chairing. And it's first and foremost, congratulations to South Africa. This is a very, very exciting time. It is a very challenging role, but it is a very, very important role because you determine and make decisions, very important decisions throughout the negotiations of the Commission on the Status of Women. And many times I've always said that people go to CSW focusing on the side events. This really is now South Africa's opportunity to really get a good grasp of the main event, which is where South Africa is chairing. So the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Men will be on the 14th to the 25th of March, 2022. South Africa is going to be, we're grateful that Her Excellency Ambassador Matu Joini, the permanent rep from South Africa, will be the chair of CSW 66th and 67th sessions in 2022 and 2023. As the chair, she is responsible to guide preparations for the session and works hand in hand together with the CSW bureaus who deputize her, consisting of representatives. And as South Africa is chairing, but South Africa is chairing and also there and representing the Africa group. We then have the other bureau chair members who represent the different regions. So for Latin America, it's Argentina. For Europe, it's it's Germany. For Asia, it's Republic of Korea. For Central Africa, we have Central Europe, we have Latvia. So we've got these different member states who would be deputizing South Africa during the CSW as what is then called the CSW Bureau. The key elements of the work of the Bureau in preparation for the session will include these Bureau meetings and consultations with member states for the sessions, briefings of NGOs prior to the session, and a lot of supporting facilitators of the agreed conclusion. Let me just start by saying that the agreed conclusions, which is a very important part of the process, is that in terms of the organization of work, the chair will brief member states and some NGOs. But what is important is that UN Women is a secretariat. So UN Women then provides the secretariat support to the chair and the bureau in the organization of the work for the session. So all these meetings that will be held to brief the bureau, to brief member states, to brief NGOs in preparation, all of that is done with the support of UN Women, our intergovernmental section that is based in New York. And they will then have briefing notes that help them to do all the briefings on all CSW related matters to be able to guide that work. And just to say that in preparation for that, the priority theme for this year is for 2022. The priority theme is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. That's the main theme, the priority theme. The review theme is women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work, which was the agreed conclusions of the 61st session. So every 5 years we go back to the review theme. So this is the review theme from the 61st session. And so to prepare for this, there normally would be a technical meeting that is held, an experts group meeting that prepares the priority theme. So there's a whole process where a group of experts from across the world sit together and comb through previous CSWs and other official documents from across the world and prepare a report, which is initially called the experts group report. That report feeds into the Secretary General's report on the priority theme. And from there are recommendations that form the draft agreed conclusions. So these draft agreed conclusions will then be prepared, and this is what the chair of CSW and the Bureau would work from with these with the agreed conclusions. And they would then spend time working through with member states, looking through that text to prepare the draft that would then go forward for the actual negotiations. So the chair really has quite a big responsibility to prepare the documentation, but also to make sure that there's constant briefing and that everybody is on the same page. The review theme, which as I mentioned is women's economic empowerment, is also important here because the review theme is an opportunity for member states from different regions to make voluntary presentations of lessons learned, challenges and best practice. And of course, for South Africa, this theme is an important one because it also aligns with the generation equality theme where South Africa is a lead on economic justice. So there would be an opportunity, and hopefully South Africa would be able to raise its hand for voluntary presentations of lessons learned, challenges and best practice. And these are selected through regional meetings, which are held at the African Union, and decisions are sort of made around then as to which countries will make their voluntary presentations. There are 3 key outcomes expected from CSW 66 to be facilitated by the Bureau members. The first is, of course, the agreed conclusions, which I've spoken about on the priority theme. The second thing is the resolution of the Commission's methods of work. And the third one is proposals on how best to utilize the 2025 year on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So there will be some discussion already on preparations for 2025. So UN Women prepares these reports of the Secretary General and recommendations as mandated in the multi-year program of work. During the session, the chair presides over the general discussion where ministers deliver national statements. So that's the first one. But the chair also presides over the negotiations. And in some instances, she may delegate one or other of her deputies to do the chairing. As you'll recall, this tends to be a very, very heavy period. So even though she's chairing, the roles are sometimes delegated and shared with her deputies, who would be the other countries who are members of the Bureau. In terms of specific roles for capital, the roles, there are no specific roles assigned for high-level officials from capital, except the possible chairing of meetings by a minister from each of the Bureau member countries, and this determination will be made later in the year as preparations for the sessions advance. So sometimes ministers are called upon from the Bureau countries to be able to chair different meetings, depending on, you know, how involved the negotiations are. And then during the negotiations of the agreed conclusions, as I said, the chair may be expected to reach out to delegations at appropriate levels to encourage them to garner support for positive outcomes of the session. For those of you who have had the opportunity to participate either live or virtually, this past year, we had an opportunity to engage virtually. For those of you who've been able to attend the CSW negotiations, you will note how difficult the negotiations are because of different interest groups, and so different countries who are taking positions, the continuous struggle with some of the thematic issues, what are sometimes called sticky issues, or areas where there's not strong agreement, and that we see are persistent year on year out. And therefore, and these would be issues such as language around gender identity, national sovereignty, the inclusion of even rights. You know, there's some sticky language that we have had persistent issues in the CSW because of really trying to find consensus amongst countries who are not necessarily agreeable with some of those rights. So the role of the chair then becomes a very important one in terms of negotiation, and being able to talk to some of the different delegations and at the appropriate level, and being able to really persuade them to take position towards a positive outcome of the session. Otherwise, the risk is that the CSW could actually collapse. And we had that nearly, I think, in 2019, actually, where there were threats even to the chair of the CSW at the time. So it is quite a difficult one, and a very important one that needs all the support from capital as well. In November, the CSW Bureau will present to member states a proposal for the organization of work of the session, including the ministerial segment and interactive events, to be followed by a chair's briefing of member states in December. So Joyce, to you, DG, this is really kind of the organization of work, and I hope that that's clear and useful, just so that we are able to understand what that process is, so that we can prepare appropriately. So that's sort of the official one. So thank you for that. I just wanted to make a comment on CSW, since I may miss that discussion, but if you'll allow me, I just wanted to make a comment on CSW, and really, I mean, on 16 days, and really excited about the idea of this going to Parliament. And just to reiterate a point that I think I have made previously, where in terms of Parliament and the issue of accountability, where in the gender responsive planning and budgeting process, we have had the opportunity to showcase the work of Uganda, and the way in which Uganda has been able to establish gender audits in Parliament of all budgets. And I'm just sharing that here because there may be an opportunity to take a look at what kind of audit and accountability process Parliament could take on to be able to really track the National Strategic Plan implementation. Since we're talking about from awareness to accountability for this year's CSW, 16 days. So sorry, I just wanted to, I know that I'm mixing up the issues, but I thought just to mention that in case I missed the opportunity. DG, back to you. I hope that is useful in terms of the CSW and its methods and organization of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It was clear. It was very clear. I think all the participants have heard and understood the presentation. We were supposed to have gone to discussion immediately after Ntsiki. We'll go to discussion now. Thank you very much. And we will give you the feedback if there are any other questions that have been asked. But about your suggestion on the gender audits being presented to Parliament, that is one of the mechanisms that Minister is looking at. Hence, even with 16 days, he had decided that you call people to account, you call people to implement certain things. And if they don't do, then Parliament has oversight authority over them. So even with regard to gender budgeting and gender mainstreaming and audits of compliance with the acts, with the legislation of South Africa, we have to, do our own work where we do the analysis and then take the reports to Parliament for Parliament to call people to account. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now I'll open up for discussions. Any questions, any follow-up to the three presentations? Minister presented and Ntsiki on 16 days, and then Ms. Chituku Shongwe also presented on the chairship. Any discussions? I can't see the hands, Charlene.
DG, I'm here. I'm just looking out for hands as they come up. I don't see any hands at the moment or indication via the chat.
Okay, if there's no hand, then we can go to the next presentation. DECO's role on South Africa's chairship. Ms. Nthabiseng Malefane, the director for groups, Director Vulnerable Groups, Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Ms. Malefane.
Good morning, DG, and thank you very much. And good morning, Minister, and everybody else. Thanks for the invitation. Okay, no, thank you. I see my presentation is up on the screen. As indicated, I'm presenting on behalf of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And I must say a lot of my presentation, the issues have been covered by both Minister as well as the presentation that just came before me by Ms. Shongwe. So I will repeat anyway, just for emphasis and clarity on some of the issues. Next slide. In terms of the framework of my presentation, I'll just do a brief introduction on the CSW and then background, and then I will go into the issues of South Africa's participation in the CSW. Next slide. Just to give a little bit of introduction. The CSW, as we all know, is a functional commission of the Economic and Social Council. And it is one of the oldest functional commissions. It was established back in 1946, so it is almost as old as the UN itself. And it is a principal global intergovernmental body that is dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. It is instrumental in promoting women's rights and documenting the reality of women's lives throughout the world. And I would like to stress this point that it's about really the reality, what women are facing currently and the challenges that women face. That's what the CSW tends to look at. And in terms of the coordination and facilitation of its work, it meets annually. We've just gotten the dates now from Ms. Shong, where the next session will be from the 14th of March, 2022. So that is the big sort of date that we are working towards in terms of the annual meeting of the CSW. And this meeting then will look at setting the global standards and reviewing progress made so far. Next slide. And then in terms of South Africa's participation in the CSW, we use our constitution as a guideline. And also we look at our foreign policy objectives, national priorities, and also the national development plan. So those are the documents that guide us in terms of the priorities that we set. And just to zoom into the foreign policy objectives, we monitor international development and then advise government and related foreign policy and domestic matters. And then we also contribute to the formulation of international law to enhance the respect and the promotion of it. And then we conduct and coordinate South Africa's international relations, and we promote multilateralism to secure a rules-based international system. We also advance for the respect, promotion, protection, fulfillment of women's human rights agenda in pursuit of the empowerment of women and gender equality. And central to this is the aim to achieve economic, social, cultural rights, as well as inclusive participation of women in the transformation of the economy. So this basically on this slide is our guiding principles in terms of the positions that we'll adopt at the CSW. Next slide. In terms of the background, the DG alluded to this as well in her introduction earlier, that South Africa has been on the Bureau. It was elected in 2018 for the term 2019 to 2023. So we'll be serving the 4-year term on the Bureau. And for the next 2 years, we are now also chair of the Bureau. So we are not just chairing the CSW, we are also chairing the Bureau. And interestingly enough, our election to the Bureau coincided with our return to the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member. We served there for 2 years, 2019 to 2020. And this presented a unique opportunity for South Africa. And what we did in the Security Council was also to look at Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. And coincidentally, we had the 20th anniversary of that resolution as well. And therefore, this is one of the main achievements that we had as South Africa in the Security Council, that we really pushed on the agenda of women, peace and security. This also coincided with the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Minister spoke to this and she indicated that unfortunately, 25 years down the line, there's no country that can boast to say it has achieved women empowerment. And that is the big task that is facing us at the moment. And lastly, this also coincided with the 5-year review of the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. In terms of the role of the Bureau, South Africa was nominated by the Africa Group. It has been stated that we represent the Africa Group in the Bureau. And then we're then elected as chair of the 66th and the 67th sessions of the CSW, and also to chair the Bureau. The Bureau plays a crucial role because it is the one that facilitates the preparation for the sessions, ensures the successful outcome, and also meets on a regular basis to keep track of things. And therefore, prior to the regular session, the Bureau identifies emerging issues, trends, focus areas, in consultation with all member states. So this is not just the Bureau that works alone, but it consults with member states. And this is done through regional groupings and taking into account inputs from other relevant stakeholders, such as civil society. I see we have a lot of civil society members today in this meeting, so the inputs of civil society are also important. And most importantly, South Africa, as the chair, will need to coordinate and collate all these inputs to make sure that they become one agenda for the CSW. Next slide. The themes, the two sessions that we'll be chairing, the 66th and the 67th session. For the 66th session, the priority theme, this was mentioned also, is achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. And then there's a review theme, which is women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work. So this is for the next year, 2022. And then for the 67th session, the priority theme will be innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. And the review theme will be challenges and opportunities in achieving gender equality and the empowerment of rural women and girls. Next slide. The role of the chair of the CSW, which is our role as South Africa for the next 2 years, is to facilitate and coordinate the work of the Bureau and chair the preparatory meetings for the sessions. And as mentioned in the previous presentation, UN Women will prepare briefing notes for the Bureau with a proposed work plan and timeline. And it will also craft the zero version of the outcome document. Then the first meeting of the CSW 66 Bureau will take place on the 1st of July, which is next week. And actually, technically speaking, it's only from next week on the 1st, when the first meeting of the Bureau for the 66th session happens, that South Africa will formally assume chair. So our permanent representative in that meeting will be given all the files and all the documents and so on. So up until next week on the 1st, we are not exactly chair as yet, but that is a big day for us next week. And then this will be followed by 4 to 5 planning meetings, planning for the next session. And for these meetings, UN Women will assist in preparing the documentation. And then the chair will also hold consultations in the meantime with member states, non-governmental organizations, which will then formally endorse the proposed organization of work. And then the final briefing will only be held prior to the regular session in March 2022, I think probably the first week of March or so. Next slide. Oh, okay. Are we on the same slide? Slide 9. Okay, thank you, yes. The CSW related matters are discussed among Bureau members who are all expected to share relevant information with their respective regional groups. And then the chair is expected to brief member states on all issues related to the session and hold bilateral meetings if that is necessary to consult with member states if there are sticky issues. And then following our assumption of the chair on the 1st, as I indicated, the chair will then present the report of the CSW 65, the one that's passed this year, to the ECOSOC management segment. And then thereafter, the chair will be expected to participate in meetings of ECOSOC, Third Committee, the UN General Assembly, and all the other functional commissions. The draft agreed conclusions will also be shared to the Bureau 5 weeks before the beginning of the regular session. That will be sometime early next year. And then this will be reviewed, comments will be gathered, and then thereafter it will be circulated to member states as a Bureau text. And member states are usually given about 10 days to provide input into the draft. Then the formal negotiations will commence. During the negotiations, I think this was also alluded to, is that the chair will need to be assisted by officials to reach out to delegations at appropriate levels to encourage them and to garner support for a positive outcome of the session. And this I can't stress enough. The previous presenter also indicated that 2 years ago, the session nearly collapsed because there was no agreement. And we wouldn't want to find a situation whereby the session collapses, when it's chaired by us. And therefore, it will be important to make sure that we, as officials, we support the chair, we reach out, we try and get consensus outside the room before we even get into the room. Next slide. The collation of information, I've also alluded to this. I've also talked about the role of supporting the chair. And it's not just about lobbying and making sure that we get a common position. There'll also be a need to analyze and negotiate and facilitate the positions just to make sure that there's consensus at the end of the day. And one of the challenges that we are facing now is that a lot of countries seem to be going back to what is called agreed language. And the challenge of agreed language is that there's no movement forward. We are stuck in the same position. We go back to the language that we agreed to 10 years ago. And hence we'll find ourselves 10 years down the line, there's still no progress in terms of women empowerment because we tend to stick to agreed language, which assists in terms of resolving conflicts and making sure that we get consensus. But in terms of getting real progress, there is a challenge with this trend of focusing on agreed language. And then the difficulties, sometimes you find that there's issues of nationalism, unilateralism. I've talked to the issue of the gains being reversed for people sticking to agreed language. So this as well, the head office-based officials will be critical in making sure that there's movement. Next slide. And then in terms of the role of DECO, here I've just gone back to the international instruments that give DECO its mandate, the Vienna Conventions, and also the Diplomatic and Consular Immunities Act that South Africa has, and the Constitution, which I talked to earlier. So DECO leads internationally based on all these instruments that are the guiding principles in terms of how foreign relations are conducted. Next slide. And then I would like to end by talking to the last slide. The Department of Women, we recognize that it is the lead department for gender machinery and it's also a custodian of South Africa's domestic policy on the empowerment of women and gender equality. And therefore, it is important that when we coordinate national positions on the thematic issues that I spoke about earlier on, that we work together so that we have the same message that we project when we get to New York. And the proposal that we have at the moment is that since the thematic issues are substance related, we've seen that the priority thing, for example, for next year is on environment and climate change, there would be a need to form subject-specific task teams that can then be led and coordinated by both the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, as well as DECO, to make sure that we have our national positions well consulted and they are in line with the negotiations that we are doing elsewhere within the UN system. We wouldn't want to find a situation whereby we find that at the UNFCCC negotiations, we say one thing and then we come to the CSW, we say the opposite of what we are saying. And some countries are very clever at this. They do what is called forum shopping. You find that if they can't get their way in one forum, then they go to the next forum and make sure that they push their agenda in that forum. So we are going to have to try to make sure that South Africa speaks with one voice in all these forums that talk to these thematic issues that have been identified. And then last and not least, I would like to talk about the permanent mission in New York. Our face for the chairing is Ambassador Joini. So she will be the person that most people will see and get to know about. The rest of us will be supporting her from behind, will not be seen or heard about. And therefore her role is important in that she will provide the political guidance and the leadership. And we all need to make sure that we rally behind her and support, and her success will be our success, because if she fails, they won't say Ambassador Joini failed, they will say South Africa failed. So thank you very much, DG, for this opportunity. I will stop here and I will answer any questions if there are.
Thank you so much, Ms. Malefane. It was an extensive presentation. I think from here, all of us in South Africa, we will know what is our role and what's expected from us. And I couldn't agree more that we need to discuss, have discussions, debate if we have to debate, disagree here at home. But when we go to the UN, we need to have a common position. That would really strengthen the leadership of South Africa, or show that South Africa is a leader indeed. Ambassador Joina, I had tried to invite her to participate. However, our timing was not correct, because 10 a.m. here for her, I think it's 1 a.m. there, but it's in the evening. She could have participated if the meeting was from 2 o'clock, because for them it would be, I think, 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. However, she says next time, if we organize properly, she will participate. Thank you very much for the extensive presentation. Before I call for discussions, I would like to invite Ms. Ranji Reddy, who's the acting Deputy Director General in the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. As indicated earlier on, that Minister wants the machinery to be informed of what the department is doing, but also Minister wants to hear from the machinery. And this has not been happening because of COVID-19 and because of other things. So Minister would like us again to resuscitate the quarterly meetings so that we can be able to discuss, raise issues and be able to report back to the machinery on the programs, the achievements and challenges that we experience as a department, but also for you to say the same thing. What are the challenges? How can we work together? How can we come up with strategies and tactics to address certain things? Before Ranji comes in, I think I saw Mabatu wrote on the chat that Farida Maybeck to look at a screen, because it seems as if the writing is from that screen. But also there's someone who's written on the chat that there are children who are locked in with their perpetrators, but that's all she says. So I'm not sure how to respond or how we can respond to that. Are the children assisted? What's happening? What assistance does she need? Maybe she can write, or she can just raise her hand after Ranji's presentation so that we can be able to hear what is the challenge. But also on the chat, there are many people who are asking for presentations. We'll talk about that at the end. Thank you, Ranji.
Thank you very much, DG. May I please interrupt?
Yes.
With permission?
Yes, Minister.
Yes. I think thanking all the presenters who have already made their presentations, and in particular, the one we just heard from DIRCO. I thought we should make an appeal to you from the information that she shared with us now, which we thank her for, to also remind ourselves that through you in your FOSATS meetings, there is a robust discussion on climate change, because a lot is going on that side. But we don't seem to be dealing with this matter of climate change at the country level. I am appealing that through your machinery, through your system, or through your structures, I mean colleagues, we give or request the department responsible to please, keep us with them, like make a presentation or mobilize through us, because the first big test on issues of climate change is going to come with a conference of parties by end of this year. And in climate change, issues of the less or non-polluters is about women who suffer much more than any other community in the world. But unfortunately, we are, as a country, put in the emitters forum because we are the only ones who are like sort of wanting to advance. But reality is, I am not feeling consultation on the things that DIRCO says we must go forum shopping. When you go forum shopping, because I did visit that place where she works for a while, you don't go forum shopping barehanded. You actually lobby friends who will go forum shopping with you because you are like-minded. Time is not on our side for COP, for the next conference of parties. Time is also not on us on the next session of CSW. I really cannot emphasize more with you that we need to regularly also interact with Ambassador Join, and we should also take this opportunity to congratulate her. I know her, I've worked with her. I know if we give her the requisite support, we will achieve what we want. But if we think other countries are not going to support us, in diplomacy, countries don't pick and choose on, or we will support them just on this. On the rest, they can do as they wish. I mean, if you are leading, you are going to be humbling yourself and also listen to other issues that other countries bring. Then forum shopping becomes better. Thank you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. What we've just said is critical. It's very critical. Yes, and I saw on the chats, I think she's the gender focal person. We have someone from DFFE. However, we have requested a meeting. We've sent a communication to the DG, but also a memo is coming your way where we are asking a meeting for minister to minister. And on FOSAT, we will place the environment issues from a gender point of view. At the, I think Monday or Tuesday, there was an economic cluster directors general meeting. There was a presentation on climate change, on adaptation, mitigation, and all those. And we agreed even with the presenters that we need to meet so that we can start looking at the themes, but also now you've raised the issue of the conference in December. So even that, women's issues are going to come up. So yes, definitely we have to include this in our discussions and also look at how do we go forward. And Minister, what you've just raised is important because even for civil society or the machinery as it's participating here, it helps them also to be able to prepare and to participate, to make sure that they also hold us accountable as a country to respond to the issues that they've raised. Thank you, Minister. And yes, Ms. Malifane's presentation was extensive. So also we will invite her to come and present at the clusters when we table this at the clusters. Thank you, Minister. And then the next presentation, Ranji. Yeah, Ranji is supposed to present on the machinery. Today, Ms. Red is presenting on the machinery so that we all understand how we are going to host the quarterly machinery. And now it's not just going to be gender machinery, hence we say JOD, so it's gender, youth, and disability. So the machinery will have to be structured in that way. Thank you very much, Ranji.
Thank you, DG. Good day, Minister and the DG, and to all participants. If Charlene can, I have a few slides, DG, just so that, you know, when it's in writing, it's easier to see. First slide, Charlene. So what I've done, DG, the approach I've taken is to just share a brief recap of the national gender machinery processes of the past so that we locate it contextually. And then I would speak to participants on the process going forward and for them to note our initiative on GOD. Next slide, Charlene. So in terms of the NGM, very quickly, the Office on the Status of Women was established in the presidency in 1997. And that served as the nodal focal point in the country as the champion of women's empowerment, women's emancipation as well, and gender equality. So that particular office developed the South African National Policy Framework for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality, which was adopted by Cabinet in 2000. And the policy framework has not been reviewed since then. And that policy framework still currently stands, and it outlines the institutional mechanisms for women's empowerment and gender equality in the country. It enunciates on the roles and the responsibilities and the accountability mechanisms. Now, the department is looking at the review of certain sections of this policy framework this year in order to bring it up to date. But that the existing policy framework it outlines a very clear national machinery. And in that chapter, it outlines the mandate of the machinery, the level of participation, the scope of the machinery, the roles of the machinery, and the structure. So that policy is still standing. It will continue to still inform the country, but there might be slight review amendments to it, given the changes that have taken place over the years. Next slide, Charlene. So in that policy framework, the national gender machinery is defined as an integrated package of structures across the state. Now, I just want to say something here about how South Africa came up with the Office on the Status of Women and all its institutional mechanisms towards gender equality and women's empowerment. I think way back from about 95, 96, the country undertook a study tour, and they looked at Canada, they looked at Australia, and they looked at Uganda as models. And that helped to establish that nodal point, because those countries actually had structures that, in fact, in I think 2 of the 3 countries, they were actually called offices on the status of women as well. So we took our cue from there, and there was a lot of consultation in the country over years in order to establish and arrive at this national gender machinery. So it was at that point, it was a collaborative effort of women in this country to define the national gender machinery. Now, what do we mean by an integrated package of structures? You'll see that it's built on 4 basic arms. One is government, and that government sector was comprising the OSW at that stage, but it will now be the Ministry for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. It comprises the provincial offices on the status of women, or what changes have subsequently taken place at the provincial level. It comprises gender focal points in national level. Now, I'll come back to what happens at the provincial level. So that's the arm of government. The second arm is that of legislature, and it looks at the national parliament and the multi-party women's caucus in national parliament. The third arm is the Chapter 9 independent statutory bodies, and in this case, the Commission for Gender Equality, but all other statutory bodies that have a relevancy to women's empowerment, gender equality, like the Human Rights, the Auditor General, etc. And the fourth arm was, or is, civil society. Now, this arm is structured in the following ways. It brings on board all of the national gender-based organizations, the NGOs, women's organizations, men's organizations, LGBTQI organizations. And then, of course, now we would look at the advancement in the country and bring in organizations on climate change, organizations on water, etc., etc. We also want to link to research institutions. And I've not listed all, but I just said other relevant stakeholder organizations because it's really vast. And then women's wings in the political parties. You must remember that the national gender machinery doesn't belong to any single entity in the state. It is made up of a number of entities. It doesn't speak any political party's perspective per se. It speaks to all women's representation. So we look at women's wings across the political parties. And then, of course, it also comprises individual women of gravitas, or feminist activists. And I know one such person of gravitas is sitting in our meeting today, and that's Mam Mbeki. So there are women like that who can lend that kind of wisdom and support and strategic direction. So those were the 4 arms. Now at the provincial level, there are similar structures, which is called a provincial gender machinery. And they are made up of the same 4 arms, but at the provincial level. So you'll find that the national gender machinery as a national footprint. So even the participation of civil society is that of the national footprint. At the provincial level, it broadens into the provincial footprint. Now, what happened with the policy framework in, I'm sorry, these chats keep coming up and they're blocking my screen. What happened at the policy level was that it did not pronounce on the local government sphere. And subsequent to that, over a couple of years, the Department of Cooperative Governance developed. I think they called it the gender mainstreaming framework, but they enunciated a very clear local government process. And then working with SALGA, there are structures that have been put in place that includes, I think, even the Women in Local Government Commission, and you know that they have annual summits. But I think going forward in the review, we will cover national, provincial, local government. Next slide, please. So the NGM, briefly, is co-chaired. Now, in the policy framework, it's co-chaired by government, and in this case, it would be the minister, the CGE, and that's the chairperson, and the legislator, which is the chairperson of the portfolio committee. Just let me remind participants again that when it was the OSW, the minister in the presidency would have been the chair, but he delegated that down to the director in the OSW. The CGE person was a co-chair person, and at that time, when we started out, it was a joint monitoring committee on, the long name, on the status of women, and that was in Parliament. And subsequently, in 2009, when the Department of Women, Children, and people with disabilities was established, then it became a portfolio committee. So that is the way it currently stands. The Secretariat for the National Gender Machinery, it is government. It was the OSW in the past, but going forward, it will be the Department for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. In the past, we used to meet at least once a quarter. And when the late former Minister Manto took over the post of the position of the minister in the presidency, she wanted the National Gender Machinery meetings held on a monthly basis. So that is still to be defined going forward. Now, the mandate and the purpose in a nutshell of the NGM sessions was people would get together and identify challenges that are being faced by women and girls in all their diversity. And then you identify the priorities that would need to be focused on based on those challenges. It became a platform for policy dialogue, for sharing of best practice. It became a platform for planning and defining a national gender agenda and an implementation plan. And it will be a platform for monitoring and holding the different arms of the NGM accountable. And that would therefore mean different stakeholders in achieving our priorities. And then, of course, it was also a platform where we planned for international engagements before we got there. And when we came back from those engagements, we reported back, and then we looked at how do we meet those commitments we're making at an international level. Next slide. So going forward, as DG has indicated, Minister wants the NGM to meet again regularly. And we define whether it's once a quarter or what the frequency would be. Now, given the evolution over the years, because of the institutional changes, priorities of women also shifting slightly, the entire conceptualization of the work of the NGM will be redefined. The former Department of Women undertook a diagnostic study, and it looked at all of the challenges that were being faced and why the NGM wasn't sustainable like the way it was under the OSW. And then it developed a coordination framework. Now the department is defining a reinvigoration of the NGM, and they would be meeting soon, as Minister is indicating. Such meetings will adopt the agenda at the meeting. There will be minutes of the meeting. The meeting will be chaired by the minister and co-chaired depending on how it is defined out. And there will always be a process where we can report back on the decisions in the minutes. And for that entire process, there will have to be terms of reference on how we participate. Why I am saying this is based on some of the challenges. If I may share one very briefly, we used to have a real difficulty with the fourth arm, that is the civil society. Because in South Africa, there is no umbrella body that represents civil society. So civil society was not able to collaborate and come up with a single position, but that you would have different organizations participating. But given that, we were still able to work very well with women's organizations and with men's organizations. We even were able to get, and I think at that time it started off with gender health, but it's now Sonke Gender Justice that was helping us as the NGM to drive a program of working with men. Now, the other challenge was also in terms of resources to encourage the participation of civil society. That's an issue that needs to be discussed. How do we do this? How do we pay for accommodation? Remember that the NGM could go over 1 day, maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. What happens to travel, accommodation, etc., in order to get civil society to participate? Even now, if we do an NGM virtually, we might want to look at what do we do about data provision. Next point, please. Next slide, please, Charlene. Okay, so I'm on my last slide, DG. Now, okay, before I even say that, let me start off by saying that currently we amalgamated with youth sector and the disability sector coming from 2 different departments. But those individual sectors have their own machinery. And those machineries they are meeting regularly at the moment. So the challenge now is aligning it in terms of the current department. So since 2019, when Minister was appointed into this portfolio, I recall the very first thing she said to us, she does not want a silo mentality. She wants integration. Now, you must remember that makes a lot of strategic sense because the women's sector comprises women with disabilities, young women, and persons of different genders, while the youth sector will then comprise women, gender, and disability factors. The disability sector comprises the age and the gender element. So it doesn't make sense for each machinery to only meet on their own, but that there needs to be that integration. So without losing any sense of individuality, there will be integrated planning, integrated priority identification, monitoring, and accountability. Now that's what DG was talking about when she said, going forward, we're talking about GIODI. Now GIODI is a term, we've not absolutely settled on it. We are using it at the moment. It says gender equality, youth, and disability. Now, what the department is currently doing is, without interfering with the 3 machineries at the moment, we're looking at a coordination mechanism so that we can also have a combination or a joint machinery meeting that can be chaired by the minister and however it unfolds in terms of co-chairing, but that at least though that joint machinery can meet, and we at this stage we're just saying 2 times, but that is up to consultation, so that it can define an overarching agenda that is an integrated approach. It can define an overarching accountability mechanism on those priorities. Now, this initiative is work in progress and will be consulted on. And we will be putting forward meetings in the next couple of months. Either there'll be youth machinery meetings or disability machinery meetings or the national gender machinery meetings, but there will also be the joint machinery meeting that is at a much higher and strategic level. Next slide, Charlene. I think this was my last slide. So DG, I submit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you for an extensive presentation. I think you've given the entire history so that everyone knows where we come from. And when we say national machinery, what do we mean? And just to say, yes, we're aware that the youth have their own machineries and disability have their own machineries. However, those are machineries like those that the department on the part of women would host. Now, the one that we're talking about now is the minister. So all of them have to prepare or attend this one, the national machinery, that would be chaired by the minister. Minister can be chairing different ones, hence the need for this integration. When the national machinery is meeting, then they will all meet together. However, in their own functioning, they will continue meeting as youth to address certain issues that could also be brought to the machinery, which the minister now will be chairing. But I think your presentation was very clear and it clarified some of the issues that might not have been understood. So today we are formally indicating that we will be inviting the machinery to participate in the meeting with the minister. I would like to open up for discussions. Thank you, Ranji. I would like to open up for discussions. Any questions?
DG, you have by Sizakele Shongwe from DSAC.
Okay. Yes. Sizakele.
Good morning, DG. Good morning, Minister and colleagues. We welcome all the presentations that have been made. Sizakele Shongwe from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. I'm responsible for social cohesion, nation building, and target groups. And of course, target groups would be women, children, older persons, and persons with disability. I think I've got 4 points to make, which I'd like colleagues to stay with in relation to particularly this presentation that has been made. But of course, there's a little bit of an overlap in the sense that some of the issues, or one of the issues around institutional mechanisms, is triggered by a point that Minister has said in relation to raising the issue that's going to be the theme for CSW and environmental issues, COPs and so forth, to say that I think at the point where perhaps the DG is sitting with other directors general, that point of generally the NGM should be raised, and in particular the issue of gender focal points and the points that are working under the Office of the Status of Women. But my 4 points are in relation to one. I'm glad that the presentation that Ranji has made says that there's still going to be further consultation, because I was wondering about that, to say with the other sectors, how much have they been consulted? But having said that and welcoming the fact that it's still going to be consulted, I think it would be good to set a time frame, because I think we'll know that in these instances, sometimes these things go on for a very long time because we haven't timed it. So it would be good to know what time frame are we putting on that consultation process, so that perhaps we can understand that the first joint national gender machinery, or rather national machinery, is going to be in January or in November or so forth. So that's the one part for me around consultations and the timeframes we need to allocate to that. But second of all, one has been in the game for a long time and maybe was not aware of some of the issues that then happened after, because I stepped out a little bit. But I think it would be good to also understand fully how that issue of the Office of the Status of Women in the provinces was knitted up, because I remember when I was last there around 2014, 15, 13, when there were changes in the institutional arrangements, they were sort of like mislocated. I remember specifically for Eastern Cape that the OSW, the official, had to be then merged with DSD in the province and so forth. So I'd really like to know if, and get a sense of comfort of where the OSW issue is. Are they in all provinces, and are they still functioning the way that we originally anticipated them to? Then thirdly, I welcome the idea of the national machinery. It does make sense, but I'm just worried about the magnitude and the size. It's just so huge. I mean, the NGM itself was huge, especially based on those 4 pillars that we know of. So I'm just not sure how we're going to manage the numbers and the impact and meaningfulness of meetings there. Then lastly, again, almost linked to the first point that I made about such matters, being raised at foresight or so forth. Some departments still do not have gender focal points, and I think it's critical to raise that sharply so that they come back and function the way they are supposed to function, especially in terms of coordination. All those issues were spoken about around gender responsive budgeting, around GBV, reporting on the NSP and so forth. I will pause there.
DG, you have further hands by Advocate Thando Gumede and Nomvula.
Thank you so much. Can I speak?
DG, you are muted as chair.
Sorry, yes. Yes,
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. So I just wanted to raise two issues. The first one is with regards to the youth machinery. I wonder if there is a place for people under the age of 14 to participate in youth issues or youth-related issues in the country. And the reason why I say this is because typically the social, economic, and political issues that affect the rest of the country do not begin at the age of 14. And I'm sure that you have noticed over the past couple of years, there's been an emergence of young feminists young activists as young as 12 and 13 years old, who have been fighting against racism in schools. Also, there is a huge problem in South African schools with gender-based violence, school-related gender-based violence. About 20% of school-going children experience gender-based violence, and about 10% of girls are raped whilst they're at schools in South Africa. And so I then wonder, are we going to have an opportunity for young people under the age of 14 to begin to participate meaningfully in the socio-economic and political issues that, quite frankly, are already affecting their own lives? The second issue is I have not heard anything about a queer machinery. And for those who don't know what queer is, it means LGBTQIA+ community. And I think that this is relevant because for the longest time, the queer community has had to piggyback on women's issues. And queer people are not necessarily women. And so what that has done is that it has made the LGBTQIA+ subordinate to women and women's issues. And what it means is that our issues have never been meaningfully dealt with. And so what has resulted from that is the normalization of our murder. So people will kill queer people, and we'll talk about it with media sensationalism, and that'll be the end of it, and nothing is meaningfully done. I really do think that we need to consider creating a queer machinery in the country that is inclusive of all queer bodies. Thank you so much.
DG, if you are muted, if I just may come in there, DG, can those raising hands please just introduce yourselves before you speak? And DG, after the hand of Ms. Nomvula, you have a Gregory Nyongane who can't raise his hand. Thank you.
Okay. Can
Good morning, DG. Okay. Good morning, DG.
Yes, Nomvula, you can speak. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, DG. And thank you very much, Minister, and my sister Anne and Ziki Ntabiseng for the comprehensive presentations. Let me start by actually congratulating the department, Minister and DG, for initiating discussions around, especially the two critical topics, 16 days NCSW as early as now, because historically, DG, the discussions on 16 days would start as late as October, when it's supposed to be held in November. And on CSW, at times we start as late as December, DG and Minister, for inputs to be consolidated and discussions for March. So I really congratulate the leadership in the department, and it looks like we are there's very great things ahead for this department. DG, on the issue of the CSW, I'm mindful of the mountain of work ahead of Minister and yourself. So I want to ask as early as now, what actually would be the role of all the participants in preparation towards the session itself in March, so that if there are any papers to be prepared, discussions, I think departments should be advised as early as now, so that those arrangements should start in earnest. Secondly, DG, we also welcome the resuscitation, of course, in a new form of the National Gender Machinery. And I think it will also assist in addressing issues which are raised on the chart. I think more than 3-4 people have raised the issues of GFPs. Either there are no GFPs in their departments, or GFPs are understaffed or under-resourced, or they're just thrown there just to fend for themselves. So I think, DG, if we really formalize the issue of the reviewed, the new look NGM, we'll have to also pull in the department of the DPSA, whereby the issue of the GFPs should really be taken very serious. And I think if it comes to a push, we need to audit the compliance across government-wide compliance, nationally, provincially, and locally. And where, DG, there's no compliance, I think there has to be enforcement measures, so that GFPs are capacitated in terms of skills, in terms of resources, support staff, and so on. Lastly, Chairperson, I also wish to say that we are willing to participate, provided we are also empowered, and the role of Department of Women, Persons with Disabilities is very critical in empowering the GFPs, who happens to be foot soldiers, in the rollout of the mandate of really transforming our society. So with those words, Chairperson, I wish to say congratulations to yourself and to the DG, to the Minister for this initiative. Thank you very much.
Charlene, there was another one that you said couldn't raise his hand.
Yes, DG.
Okay, thank you.
Gregory, yes, he's on the floor.
Okay, thank you, DG. That I'm Gregory Nyongani from Department of Transport and Safety in the Northern Cape. I think there's a number of things that which some speakers have raised. Let me refer back to document 2012 done at the Kuleni Conference by CGE, which was that time under the auspices of former Minister Lindy Cingwane, where a clear picture was painted that where focal people needs to be placed in the HUD's office, which the documents are supposed to be taken down to cabinet. I think that document will also be able to guide you in a number of things which are being said by focal people that time at that conference, because it has been a frustration going on about for now 26 years in this country in terms of focal points, where we basically saying today that it's still a confusion. The second thing is that we need to start looking into talking to the AG's office again, that to start creating audits to be done at departmental levels, so that there should be preemptive measures to head of departments. Let's take the HUD's 8 principles now. It is just a ticking box exercises in all the provinces. Most of them is that for the sake of compliance, it is done because it's going to be signed. Some of them don't even read what are they signing for. They just sign for the sake of signing, it ends there. And then another thing is that it's time that we should stop talking about APPs. We should implement APPs. Then we go to the bullies called policy units, which then end of the day then, when focal people start putting policies together and recommend policies, they're not bothered about these policies anymore. They believe that they should do what they can do as as policy units in the country. And that becomes a frustration to a lot of people when it comes to that as well. Then the worst part is that most of the DGs now, it's still male dominated. Do we like it or not? It's male dominated. How do we break those eyes of those DGs to start coming to what they're supposed to be doing? End of the day that if it's not in their performance contracts to be held accountable, end of the day that we will stick where we are today. Let's take 16 days. It's another exercise that is being done to death because what's being done to death? Because they don't put money aside for that. It is just basically that it's a compliance exercise.
On the on GFPs in the departments. Oh, sorry.
Gigi, I think there was an interruption.
Also continue.
Yeah.
Okay, what I was basically saying that it's time that the DG must take the DGs on accountability and responsibility. And in the performance agreements that all the KPIs being set in the strategic documents now needs to be in the performance contract. They must be held accountable. And end of the day that if they cannot be held accountable, the CFOs at treasury levels that, and then a lot of work can then be introduced and then can then be implemented, including DPSA as well, that when it comes to practice notes, let them write practice notes that where we can then as focal people, hold them accountable on what needs to be done at provincial levels. It is a frustration. I may be male, but I'm sitting with the same frustrations as women are sitting on focal points where work needs to be done. And we are tired about this, by the ways, and ticking box exercises which should be done in terms of implementation. Thank you, DJ.
Thank you, Charlene. Any other hand?
Yes, DG, there are hands.
How many? Are they many? Are they many?
No. There was a hand of Samsung 810 that lowered, but we do have the hands of Bia Hakula and Patsy Delora.
Okay, let me take those two only so that they can respond. If there are other hands, we'll take them later.
Thank you very much, Mabato. Mine is around the issue of succession planning and what the government does in terms of women empowerment. I have observed over the years and recently that women in leadership programs, they only centered around the August month, more like events, and there's no concerted effort in terms of at provincial level that there is a program for that looks at succession planning and women in leadership. And I think this is something that needs to be integrated both from DPSA and the National School of Government, because even there is no structured program that does specifically with women in leadership. And lastly, there is also a notion from women that are in leadership that they think that they're immune in terms of development in leadership. And as a result, they don't support the women that are in middle management according to the principle of lift as you rise. And I think those are those two things that needs to be addressed. Whilst we pinning the responsibility at the accounting officers level, there is a responsibility throughout the chain in terms of leadership, especially women leaders themselves, that they need to champion that change. I'm not saying men shouldn't be doing anything, but the two things that needs to be addressed is around succession planning, as well as women in leadership. I do agree with the proposal that says it must be in the agreements of the accounting officers, performance agreements. But I think every senior manager has a responsibility, and those two things can make sure that there is progress that is desired in terms of transformation, starting within the public service, and then it can trickle down to other organizations that are outside government. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one? Charlene, who was the other one?
It's Patsy Delora.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister, DG. Thank you. I think first and foremost, my name is Patsy Delora. I'm the CEO of Partners in Sexual Health. I just want to congratulate South Africa. I think it's a momentous moment, the fact that we've actually been going to chair the CSW and also chairing, of course, the Bureau. I think listening to all the discussions from DIRCO, from the UN, as from the minister as well, and yourself, DJ, I think we mustn't underestimate the power that South Africa is currently having in turning maybe the tide in terms of gender-based violence in relation to climate change, of course, but looking also the second year of rural women and young girls. PSH, for instance, are now being funded by the EU to drive the civil society reference groups in Africa in terms of gender-based violence and femicide. And I was just thinking at the links of how do we, as an organization, as a reference group, collectively engage with the department that is obviously now the chair, and moving forward for the next 2022-23 in terms of gender-based violence, and actually ensuring that whatever we've been doing in relation to gender-based violence within the African continent be pushed forward through the chair. So what my question is that how do we engage with you to ensure that we can actually assist and work together as from a civil society point of view? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. I want to go back to Sizagele's questions. I will respond to some and I will request my colleagues to respond to the others. On the issue of institutional mechanisms, integrating women, youth, and persons with disabilities, and the LGBTQIs. Yes, it's going to be a huge mandate, but the way we're going to do it, as I said earlier on, that the machineries will meet on their own. When we go to minister, it's where we take certain issues to the national machinery. So it doesn't mean that all the things that have been discussed in their separate machinery need to come to the national machinery. The national machinery will then address issues that could not be resolved in their separate machineries. But also it would be really difficult for minister to have separate machineries with separate groups. However, in terms of the program, the way it's going to be structured, it will be structured in such a way that at a certain point we're able to address issues of disability. As Nsiki was saying, what's her name, Ranji was saying, that you can't talk disability and not talk women and young persons. You can't talk women and not talk women with disabilities and young persons, or women who are diverse. You can't talk young persons and not talk young persons with disabilities, young females and young persons, LGBTQIs, you know, all those. So all people who will be participating will participate in the different aspects. It's just that at a certain point, the program will be focusing on disability. It will be focusing on different areas. Also, the status of the OSW, I think that is a challenge. I remember there was a challenge at that time. I think it was during Minister Susan Shabangu's time, when some of them were taken to DSD and some of them were taken to agriculture and other government departments. I'm not sure if it's still the case now, because I thought it was rectified. So it's something that we will have to discuss, but also I've requested Esther to respond to some of the questions. So she will indicate what is the status with the OSWs. The size of the NGM, I've already responded to that. And then some departments have no gender focal points, and Esther Maluleke will respond to that. Tando, on youth machinery, I would like Mabatu Ramakhoshi to respond to your question. And then the second one on LGBTQI machinery. Nothing stops the LGBTIQ machinery to continue meeting on their own. And then, like I said, with youth, with persons with disabilities, women, all of them. But when we meet with the minister, then we will address different categories. So where the minister will be leading, so it will be, as I said earlier on, there will be a time for youth, there will be a time for persons with disabilities, there will be a time for LGBTQIs, there will be a time for women, so that certain specific issues are addressed. Mayor Mabatu Ramakhoshi, can you please respond to the youth machineries?
Okay. Thank you, DG, and good morning, Minister and everyone. I totally agree with Tando that we definitely need to have a youth in terms of adolescent movement. And what we need to be doing, for me, is to talk to the Department of Basic Education to ensure that now in each and every school, together with UNICEF, they now have some form of young people's organizations, but we have to go back to the Department of Basic Education to revive the girls and boys education movement, because those were the spaces where these young children were speaking for themselves about issues that affect them. Because when they go and meet with older people, they tend to be taken by the voices of older people. So as I totally agree that the national gender machinery will talk about all issues affecting the different groups, but we give the space for young people, and GBE must lead in ensuring that all the voices of young people are heard through the different movements. I mean, I know Soul City had soul bodies, and they still exist in some schools. So we need one body that will bring the voices of children who are in schools. And I think that's where we need to focus on. The discussions between the department and GBE around that is very, very critical. Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you, Mayor Ramakhoshi. Tando, when you spoke about statistics, that's when people start realizing that it's not just the story, it's reality. You refer to 10% girls being raped, and when you say that it's even 7-year-olds being raped, it's scary. As Mabatu said, that's DPE, but I agree with Mabatu that we as a department need to also partner with them to ensure that the BAMs and GEMs continue, but also for us as a department to monitor. The department is, our minister is the chair of the IMC on gender-based violence and femicide. So she also has a responsibility to ensure that all government departments play their role in terms of addressing gender-based violence. So that's further one aspect that we will be partnering with the Department of Basic Education. As Mabatu has said, that it must lead, it already has the framework. And now also, I think what we need to do is to look at the decisions are taking place so that we can also encourage on that one. Thanks, Mayor Ramakhoshi. Ms. Nomvula Makhoso, you asked about CSW. What would be required for us as South Africa to prepare for the proper sharing of the CSW. Hence the meeting today. And also we indicated that we will be consulting further. We're going to consult with civil society organizations. We're going to consult with all the machineries, youth. We have to consult with youth. We have to consult with persons with disabilities and the GFPs. We have to consult also with the sector, LGBTQI sector. So we will be having consultations and we'll send communications in terms of what departments need to prepare on. As I indicated earlier on, after the minister said FOSAT must take responsibility, must lead on the dialogues on environment, climate change, and the responsibility for all government departments to promote women's economy and livelihood within the climate change challenges and all those. I indicated that there's someone from DFFE. They will also have to play a role. We'll be asking them so that they lead the processes of discussions in order for us to prepare for March 2022. We might think it's next year. It's not that far. It's few months from here. So we will definitely be preparing together. And then Grigori, the question about Grigori and the request that an audit be made. I request Mayor Esther Maluleke to present. To respond to your concerns.
Thanks, DG, for the opportunity to respond. We conducted a dipstick analysis of the National Gender Machinery in 2018. We have a comprehensive report that we've shared across clusters in government. That report is available and the findings are telling. Most of them are the weaknesses that we've known over years in terms of the capacity of the machinery. But the reason why we did the dipstick analysis is because the intention indeed was to actually revitalize the machinery and to see where we can actually strengthen the machinery. I think perhaps the best thing would be to present these findings in the next machinery meeting that we're going to have, just so that we share the findings with everyone and they know what some of the challenges are and what are the strengths, of course, within the machinery. But we've gone further, DG, this year to build on that assessment. And the reason is we've been engaging on the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence with colleagues at national level, province, but most importantly, at municipal level, including SALGA. And there's a very strong theme that is coming through about capacity. And this relates to technical capacity of colleagues to be able to do the work that they're supposed to do. So this forced us to follow up on the assessment we did in 2018 to specifically conduct a survey on capacity building so that we really clear in terms of what are the type of skills specifically that are required. We should, DG, be able to finalize that report soon. And when we meet as machinery, we'll combine these findings to share. But what we are working on in terms of taking these findings forward is engaging extensively with the National School of Governance, because I think we're going to require a tailor-made program, capacity building program, but also that takes into account the training on gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation framework. So we've had preliminary discussions, but I think this is the direction in which we are moving about capacity building. But it really has to be technical and move away from just raising awareness about this thing. But the other significant thing that I think we'll be building into this capacity building is not only to focus on gender focal points, because we are realizing more and more that for us to make any significant transformation and move, it's yes to build capacity of gender focal points. But remember, at least in government, they are not program implementers. So we need to have another tailor-made program. And this is a need, again, that we are identifying, because in our engagements, we don't only engage with gender focal points, we also invite program managers, people that are responsible for implementing programs, including allocation of resources, which are CFOs, into our meeting. So we will again need a tailor-made program to actually train program managers on gender mainstreaming, and especially the technical side of it, so that it makes the work of gender focal points much easier. And I think for now, this is a huge gap that we are identifying, but we can certainly share these findings, perhaps in the next meeting, in terms of the two assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mema Luleka. But just to add on what you said, the DPSA, there's a DPSA document which is called 8 Principle on, was that HOD's 8 Principle Action Plan for promoting women, youth and persons, for promoting gender equality, not the others, it was on promoting gender equality, which outlines the 8 principles that the heads of departments must comply with. We've already discussed it. There was a presentation at the DG clusters where we discussed the 8 principles, but also the report that Esther is referring to, where we are saying to directors general, they must take responsibility. And we are aware that some of I think government is regressing, unlike before. Now they are removing gender focal points and the others to HR, or where you had 3 different directorates that were responsible for gender, others for youth, others for disability. They integrate them into one directorate, and it means they are understaffed. So it's something that we're working on. We're also looking at the APPs. There was a question about integrating issues of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, and definitely issues of LGBTQIs in the APPs of the DGs. We're assessing the APPs in order to ensure that they are responsive, also to look at whether they integrate the gender responsive planning and planning, monitoring, and evaluation to ensure that whatever plan that they do, they integrate these 4 sectors. I think there was a question also from Bia Hakula, succession plan in government. On women's leadership, I agree with you. And it's not just succession plan as in for people to take positions in government. However, even as chairship or in boards or other institutions of government, it's something that we need to look at. But also in terms of enterprise, because it's not just this position. When you look at economic empowerment broadly, government and some of these that I'm going to say are in their master plans or in their strategic plans. However, it's not happening. Where we look at enterprise and supplier development, training and development to ensure that women participate also in the economy. Now South Africa is talking about infrastructure, and which is a sector that is looking at over $1 trillion. How do we ensure that women participate? So it might not be a succession plan as in you know, being appointed in a position, but also to participate. It's a program that now as a department we are working on, but we cannot work on a program for other government departments. Other government departments need to develop plans for succession. I'll make an example that in the Department of Justice, when I was still in the Department of Justice, we had an aspirant women judges program where we were training women in order for them to take up positions. Now the judiciary, it might not be 50%, but starting from 2 women in 1994, now the judiciary having so many women, it's because of the programs that have been planned. So yes, I agree with you. Patsy Delora, I think your question is similar to that of Nomvula, where she was saying, how do we engage with regard to the CSW, the chairship, the review of the methods of work? Definitely, we will be communicating. We will be hosting consultative workshops from here. And as indicated when I started that, we wanted the ambassador herself, Ambassador Joini from New York, to participate. However, because of the time, she couldn't participate. So next time, the consultation that we will have next time, we'll start it at 2 o'clock so that she can participate. It will still be in the morning for her, 7 a.m., but she's willing to participate during that time. So there will be consultation throughout. And as I indicated earlier on, that we also have to consult beyond South Africa, within the continent, because yes, South Africa is chairing, but South Africa was endorsed by Africa in order for it to chair. So there will be a lot of consultation so that we can really transform the functioning of the CSW. Charlene, were there other hands?
Chair, yes. Well, there is hands. I think it must be a follow-up from Sizakele, and Ranji's hand is also up at the moment. Probably.
Okay. Does Ranji want to respond to the other questions, maybe before Sizakele? Yes, Ranji.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to respond to 2 issues and make one comment, DG. The one on Gregory's issue of performance agreements and the audits. I think we need to inform this platform that the department has also got a framework called Gender Responsive Planning, Budgeting, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Auditing Framework that was adopted by Cabinet in 2019, and it's being implemented. So that framework, DG, and maybe in future meetings we can present it, it speaks to the issue of how do we institutionalize our processes within governments, and it also looks at performance agreements. It has, at this stage, enabled the department to look at all the performance agreements signed between ministers and the president, and it's done an analysis, and it's found it's actually carrying the issue of gender responsiveness, youth responsiveness, disability responsiveness. There's also DG's performance agreements that have been analyzed, and it's making inputs into how performance agreements of senior managers in departments should also be looked at. And then in terms of the auditing, DG, the framework speaks to the working with the Auditor General's office. So those are on track, and I think we need to share that. The second issue, DG, I want to pick on the last issue, but it's coming through even on the chats, is how do we engage with different organizations? A generic point that I want to make, DG, is that we as a department will have to build up a database. And so we will embark on processes to develop this database, and we'll reach out to different organizations through different ways so that we can build this in order to engage further. And the last point, DG, maybe you had forgotten, but the department is building on working on the gender responsive budgeting issue with National Treasury, and towards a strategy and training mechanisms. And we are embarking on working with the National School of Government. And that process is currently a big initiative with the IMF, and we'd want at some stage going forward, DG, to share even that with this platform. The gender responsive monitoring, budgeting, planning framework, DG, is also being extended into youth and disability. I'll rest there, DG. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranji. All the things that you've raised, and you kept on saying we need to share, and Esther also said the same thing. That is why we need the NGM, but also with gender focal persons and youth focal persons and disability focal persons and others in government departments, maybe on a monthly basis where we can, because it's for us to be able to share the information and the work that we're already doing. And then Caesar Gele.
Okay, this is just a comeback from the comments that I've already made on the chat to say that I think as we are engaging in thought processes and thinking, we also have to take into consideration some facts. For instance, I fully support the point that has been raised about young activists as young as 13, maybe even 12, 14, but to just go back to the definition of a child in South Africa and the age of a child, so that we do not mix children with youth per se. And to say that, yes, we support the BAMGEM work that would have been done by the Department of Basic Education, but I also believe that the Department of Social Development is the custodian of the Children's Act, and they actually have structures that look into children's issues specifically, because maybe education would be specifically from education side. I know that they've got gender programs as well, but DSD tends to look at the overall welfare of the child, and they have your child protection, they have your children's parliament and so forth. But yeah, the point is just around the age categorization and so forth. I pause.
Thank you. Before I call Sylvia, I'd like to call Mayor Mabatu Ramakgoši to talk about just a little bit about generation equality and also South Africa's leadership on the economic justice, because Mayor Jituku Shongwe referred to the generation equality and that South Africa chairs the economic justice aspect. We will share more on it in the next forums, but I thought she needs to clarify that part. Thank you. Mayor Mabatu Ramakgoši.
Thank you very much, Madam DG. I think, as you're saying, there will be a bigger presentation around GF in the next meeting of the NGM. But just to indicate to everyone that I know that since last year we've been talking about Generation Equality Forum, and most of the people on the call were even ready to go to CSW where GF was going to be discussed, but all that changed. So we already had the Mexico Forum of Generation Equality Forum, and now we are preparing for Paris, where there will be GF meetings taking place from the 30th of June to the 2nd of July. And I'm asking everyone, if you have not registered, to please register on the UN Women website, because the registration is closing on Sunday. And with the Paris Forum, they made it very clear that if you are not registered, you won't be participating. Now, South Africa, and with other countries like Germany, Mexico, Spain, are co-leaders on the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights. And we co-leaders with CSOs and also philanthropies like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So to be a co-leader in an Action Coalition, you take responsibility to be the one advocating on behalf of and ensuring that you bring a lot of people around the issue that you are co-leading. I think I'm speaking with activists to understand that there are 7 action coalitions that the UN Women that is co-leading with France and Mexico. that different member states, CSOs, private sector, and philanthropy organizations are co-leading in order to accelerate gender equality and women's empowerment by 2030. So the Generation Equality Forum, as we all know, is really trying to ensure that Beijing Platform for Action is achieved in this decade, and also the Sustainable Development Goals. So as a country, we have been co-leading on the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights, but I think maybe let's just to share that now that the Paris event is taking place next week, member states, individuals, private sector were asked to make commitments, that you are committing to make a drastic change on gender equality in this decade. And when you commit, either you commit to lead with policy formulation, or you commit to lead in terms of finances, or you commit to implement program, or you commit to raise awareness. So as a country, the Multi-Stakeholder Generation Equality Forum has been meeting, and we have different action coalitions that are co-led by government and civil society organizations. They will be having build-up activities before Paris, and UN Women and DERCO are providing, and Department of Women have been the ones leading in this, but different CSOs have different activities that they are going to have prior to Paris event that is happening from the 30th of June to the 2nd of July. And as a commitment, South Africa has committed to, under the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Right, the first commitment that we've made as a country was that we will implement a 40% preferential procurement in the public sector towards women-owned businesses in order to increase the number of women entrepreneurs in the country and further support the substantiality of women-owned businesses. South Africa will also continue to work with other African countries towards the realization of 30% preferential procurement in the public sector towards women-owned businesses in the context of the African Women's Decade for Economic and Financial Inclusion. The second commitment that South Africa is making is to launch the Advocacy Accelerator for Women Digital Financial Inclusion in Africa. This is an initiative that will mobilize stakeholders to invest towards new and strengthened platforms to increase access and utilization of digital financial products and services for women in Africa. The third commitment that South Africa is making is South Africa will lead the development of the AU protocol and program for action on women in trade through AFCFTA, which will ensure the activation of a trade facilitation program for cross-border traders and other women businesses. And the fourth commitment that South Africa is making is to establish a GBV fund in South Africa to finance effort to eradicate GBV, building onto the foundation of the private sector-led fund that was launched now in 2021. And then the fifth commitment is to support the establishment of the African Union Circle of Champions on GBVF. This will be a group of heads of states and other champions that will lead policy and programmatic effort to address GBV in the continent. Our sixth commitment is to continue to train grassroots women and youth domestically and in the continent on conflict resolution, mediation, and negotiation. This is on the Compact on Women, Peace and Security Compact. And then the seventh action it will be to implement the hashtag Time for Peace drive, where as a country will host annual youth peace festivals, peace corner conversations, and peace walls. And lastly, the eighth one is to continue to strive for a gender responsive humanitarian aid that restores human dignity and brings relief to women programs. So the 9th will be, as we all know, that this year South Africa has launched the Charlotte Manye Maxeke celebration. South Africa indicated that, presented this to the UN, and the UN women, together with the core leaders, which is France and Mexico, took the Charlotte Maxeke initiative as a signature commitment. They looked at it and really supported South Africa's proposal on Charlotte Maxeke Women's Economic Justice Rights Initiative, where South Africa will mobilize the global community to support women's leadership across all the action coalitions, particularly on economic justice and rights, through education, training, and mentorship for women and youth, as well as creating opportunities in political participation, diplomacy, and trade. The Charlotte Maxeke initiative will launch collaborative projects with targeted support for women and girls to ensure that they have increased opportunities in decision-making across political and economic spheres. And the last commitment is to advocate for the rights of all women, particularly adolescent and young women in all their diversities, to access sexual and reproductive health, rights, and services, given the impact of COVID-19 and the multiply effects that limited access on physical, social, economic, and educational status. So we as a country are participating in all this, but also we know that different organizations and different member states, including CSOs, have collective commitments. So we also are saying we will support any collective commitment with other action coalitions, and our Action 11 is to support the action coalition that talks on the ratification of the ILO Convention 190, where we agree with them that as leaders and commitment makers of Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence and Economic Justice and Rights, we commit to prevent and eliminate gender-based violence and harassment against women in all their diversity in the world of work, integrating an intersectional approach that applies to all sectors, whether private or public, both in the formal and informal economy and in urban or rural areas, through one or more of the following: the advocacy of ratification and implementation of ILO C-190, ratification and implementation of ILO C-190, and the adoption and implementation of gender transformative workplace policies and programs in line with the ILO C-190 recommendations. So the outcome of the Paris Forum, which has been highlighted as for head of states, will be, there needs to be after a Paris programs. And those are the things that we will present in the next NGN. Because by 2026, there must be a report in terms of how we've moved the needle globally with regards to gender equality and women's empowerment. And by 2030, to get that planet 50-50 that we all are aspiring for. Thank you, Gigi. Madam Joyce,
Thank you. I was talking whilst I was muted. Thank you for the presentation. I'd like to give people just 2 minutes to follow up if they want to follow up, to ask questions or to comment on this presentation. Charlene?
Did you have a hand from Zanele Mabaso and a hand, I think a follow-up hand from Nomvula once again.
Okay, yes, can they? Yeah, I'll take those 2 hands and then we'll go to Sylvia.
Thank you, Chair, and also Mabato for that closing response, I guess. I just wanted to share a concern that I have with some of the activities that were outlined for youth, particularly a youth festival. Now I know that over 100 million went down the drain in 2009 through the NYDA in the implementation of a youth festival, of which we're still waiting for a report from the public protector 11 years later. So I'm just expressing concern about the feasibility and the impact of youth festivals, and what I would rather recommend be done, because we have a directory of over 400 civil society organizations active that we work with at a national level, including the South African Youth Council, that when it comes to youth CSO activities that the department wants to implement, that there be some form of consultation that takes place with the youth sector. And we agree on effective and meaningful activities that can be implemented that will have long-term tangible outcomes. So I'm happy to engage with you directly on this offline and see how we elect the best activities for the youth demographic. Thank you, Chair.
And the next hand you said from Nomvula.
Yes, I'm sure it's a follow-up hand. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you so much, Ms. Mabatu, for the presentation on the Generation Equality Forum. My take is that, Chair, I'm not sure, I might be the only one who is missing the discussions, you know, at a public platform of the Generation Equality. From what Memabatu is explaining, it looks like it's an initiative that must be all-inclusive, all-encompassing, and be bought or sold to the broader society in our country. But so far, I'm not sure how far have we gone in terms of popularizing this very noble initiative. I mean, we are talking of Mexico, which went by. Perhaps there was a critical mass of participation by South Africans. I'm not sure. There's Paris, which is happening next week. I'm aware that there are some people who are engaging with the processes, and we have thankfully been given the link to register. I'm not sure whether other people outside of this platform also have the opportunity to get this information about registering. And if not, how are we going to inform them and when? You know, because for the few of us, the 100+ of us who are on this platform, we can spread the message, but I think we need a broader process to inform the South African public of this initiative. I'm also listening to the commitments made by South Africa. They are all very critical and interesting commitments, but I'm aware that, you know, in most cases, if you make a lot of commitments, some of them, they end up falling in the cracks. It's either some of them fall in the cracks or all of them, there's no quality work done because we are you know, concentrating on so many initiatives. I was thinking that perhaps out of this, we can select a few where we really put our best, put our all, which will be a really stellar work that will be presented and showcase the efforts of South Africa. Not unless if the department is confident that there will be really capacity and support to implement all this commitments. But for me, it looks like we might be biting more than what we can chew as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ramakgoši.
Thank you very much, Nomvula, and did I miss the Zanele? Yeah, Nomvula and Zanele for your input. Zanele, let me start. Maybe let me start with Nomvula, and I'll come back to you. That as 100 and something people are in 53 who are in this call will remember that the initial agreement that even the minister made as we met at holiday in the Southern Sun in Pretoria, where she wanted that we will go from province to province, really discussing the issue on generation equality. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and in the COVID issues, the bigger ideal of ensuring that we get to provinces and having more voices of women coming as we're going to relive the Beijing conference. It didn't happen the way it was supposed to have happened. But there have been multi-stakeholder meetings of 200, 300 different people representing organizations that were hosted by UN Women, and mostly because it has been partnership with CSOs and government. Now, with regards to how do we ensure many more people, we anticipated that UN Women will have their communications, continuously working with communications in government to make the Paris event known to South Africa, especially with regards to registering by Sunday. Yes, Mexico came, and Mexico is done. And the draft documents that were discussed in Mexico, I mean, Mexico had more than 10,000 people participating. And South Africa, there was a number of people participating. But I think the biggest challenge that we are raising, that also Ranji raised, is the issue of data. People not being able to participate because they don't have data to log on and participate. And it's going to be the same with Paris. We now UN Women has brought a company that has developed a platform where South Africa will be able to participate in. That platform is even bringing more people in the region, our continent, to participate. But for you to even get into that platform, you would definitely need data, because it's all linked electronically. So we'll continue ensuring that more people participate. Shalen has put the link of registering to Paris on the chat. So please, everyone, participate. Now, with regards to the youth festival, the peace festivals, this is not government-led peace festival. As we're saying, is an action coalition on women, peace and security compact. And in that action coalition that is co-led by government and civil society, for their action coalition, they identified those, and these are organizations already working in the area of women, peace and security. These are the organizations that have been dealing with mediation, organizations that are working with young people, giving them skills on conflict resolutions as individuals, but also how to intervene if there's a conflict in the area. So it's not a government-led program, but it's an action, that compact on women, peace and security, and the organizations that identified those as things that can be done in the 5 years to be able to bring as many young people as possible, to train young people as possible, but also utilizing the DERCO training because DERCO every year they train women and young people on women, peace and security, on how to become mediators. So that is what South Africa has adopted in the multi-stakeholder, to say, actually on these ones, we will be able to do because we've got people working in the area. And even with the other action coalitions, because it's not government-led, is a multi-stakeholder, and people are saying, we're already having policies here, so we will be able to implement this, because the action coalitions seek to ensure that as a country, we implement the commitments we made in the Beijing Platform for Action. So it's not new things, it's enhancing what we've already committed, and we are reporting every 5 years on our programs in implementing BFA and also the SDGs. Thank you very much, Joy.
Thank you. And just to add to what you've just said, the department is now is holding discussions with National Treasury to look at how do we regulate the 40% procurement for women, even though it might not be in the legislation. So we're looking at how we can be able to come either with national instructions or whatever policy directive that we can work on. On gender-based violence, also, there's a lot that the department is doing. Before I even call Sylvia, I just want to indicate that all of you who are participating here are also going to get an invite. On the 7th of July, Minister will be launching the first report on the implementation of the National Strategic Plan on gender-based violence and femicide. So you will be getting the invites. The department and all the stakeholders have compiled a comprehensive report on the implementation of that. So there are many things that are already happening to show that we will comply. Now, the biggest challenge that the department is working on is economic power for women. That is what we're working on. You'll also, the department will also be communicating with all sectors or organizations of women to request them to mobilize women to invest where there's a necessity to invest, so that women in South Africa can own a piece of South Africa. That's what we're working on. Women must start talking ownership of national assets and other things. So we will definitely be communicating with you. The way we are working, we're trying to push that by 2030. Everybody will be surprised that how did South Africa get here, but we're working on it. Minister doesn't sleep. Minister always calls, DG, when do I see women getting tenders to build roads? When do I see women getting all this? And we are working on that. So we are really trying to make sure that when I say women, I include everybody else. I know that I have to say women, youth, persons with disabilities, LGBTQIs. Sometimes it's easier just to say women, not that I exclude the others, but we are definitely working on that. Without wasting time, I would like to call Mayor Sylvia Stephen Mazia to present on the way forward.
Good afternoon, DG, Minister, the advisor to the Minister, in absentia, the UN woman, Ms. Anne Shango, that is not here, that have to leave us early, our colleagues from DERCO, our colleagues that come from the gender machinery, from the youth machinery, the disability machinery, everybody who've participated, colleagues in this platform. Mine is to just summarize, because within the deliberations, as the process unfolded this morning, there have already been a clear way forwards. I just want to once more remind us that this year, we are having 30 years anniversary in terms of the 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children. This conversation and this campaign have been happening for far too long, and hence the overarching principles of the way forward is the awareness have been raised, the awareness have been driven by civil society, driven by government, driven by development agencies, driven then on into policies, frameworks, guidelines, and hence when Minister was addressing us the importance of action, from activism to real action. And this action that is being called upon is the action around accountability. The clear understanding that we have is with the multi-sectoral approach that we have, we shall all take full responsibility in accounting what was planned, how did it happen, what did not happen, what worked, what did not work. We are therefore in this whole sector united in taking full responsibility that as per the roadmap that have been outlined, both in the campaign for the 16 days from the 25th of November to the 1st of December, including all the other important days in between. How will we actualize to make sure that we account in line with reports and frameworks, not just accounting to ourselves, accounting to the continent, also accounting globally, as we are global partners in terms of our role in the chairship, as being so eloquently outlined and clearly defined the role of South Africa in the CSW chairship, in the Bureau. I'm not going to try and repeat it. It was already put very clearly. Colleagues and friends, this is giving us a very important opportunity for us that when we study the roadmap and we submit and we comment in terms of the concept document and the integration, that no longer will we have an isolated plan and activity and response, but it will be a response and a coordination that will be responsive in line also with the COVID situation. We are responsible to have a COVID-ready combat approach in terms of our actualization of the processes that we have. Therefore, there has been a clear recommendation that the database in terms of the stakeholders will be maintained, will be enrolled, will then also be utilized as a mechanism to enhance our communication, our accountability, and also our united voice. We will then be able to roll it out furthermore to unpack how will that database process happen. The different machineries will continue to meet and they will be continuing taking all the points that was under discussion into their machineries and then also activate their activities in line and account in line with the frameworks that there is. Then we will then also furthermore, as per the DG has said, on the 7th of July, there will be a report. So we will be having all these step ladders and we will continuously have civil society, strong mobilization, coordination, accountability process within the process with a one united South African voice in terms of when we go to the 2022 CSW, when we do go to the 16 days, how are we going to make sure that the generation equality process is included? And how are we going to ensure that the gender responsive planning, monitoring, budgeting, and auditing framework that there is will also be activated and processed? With those few words, allow me to thank you, DG, and also to thank everybody else that was here. This was a summative form of the way forward. A much more detailed one will then also be shared with the participants. Thank you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mazia. In closing, first of all, I would like to thank the Minister for participating. The Minister has been listening to you guys. She's been quietly sitting there and listening to every question and every input that has been made. And if I know the Minister very well, she'll be asking me one day, DG, someone asked this question, what have you done about it? So I will have to respond. But also as a department, and I know Minister is happy about the meeting, the participation, the cooperation, our department and the machinery, national machinery, women, youth, persons with disabilities, LGBTQIs, and you know, whoever I might have left out, we are joined in the hip We cannot divorce each other. We might fight, we might do whatever, but we need each other. And we have to work together to ensure that all the people that we're representing here, that their rights are promoted, that their voices are heard. We need to work together. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for responding with the numbers that you have responded. I think at some point we were about 180 something people. And despite the short notice of receiving the invites. And that is one other thing that Minister always wants us on, that we need to invite people on time. So we're going to change the way we do things. We apologize for any inconvenience that we have made, but we are definitely going to work together. We've presented to you, we've been open, we've put the cards before you. So even with CSW, we need to work together going forward. With 16 days, we need to work together going forward. We need to look at how would even civil society be able to participate. And I know that the way civil society can participate is to collect information and show the reality about access to courts for women subjected to gender-based violence, young people at schools. You know, I think it was Tando who spoke about 10% of young people being subjected to gender-based violence. How did we respond to that? The Department of Health, access to counseling after young children and others have been raped. Are they receiving counseling and all those? We need to document the reality so that we can be able to change that reality. Because if we don't document it, then people will continue saying, I've done 1, 2, 3, I've done 1, 2, 3. So the meetings is so that we can report to you, we can agree or disagree. You need to tell us that we think you're not doing things this way. You need to suggest how we're going to do things. But as the Department of Women, as the minister, the Ministry for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, all gender focal persons of all government departments and yourselves, we are together. Thank you very much for participating in this meeting. Thanks to all the people who presented. Thank you to Minister for gracing us. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you,
Gigi. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, colleagues. Bye-bye, colleagues.